Thank you very much, everybody. And today the Health Minister has announced more details of our testing and contact tracing programme, which will of course be a crucial element of our efforts to move out of lockdown. Contact tracing teams are being scaled up with the recruitment of nursing professionals, environmental health officers and volunteers to staff call centres. COVID-19 test centres are also operational in Belfast, Londonderry, Craigavon and Enniskillen. We are acutely aware of the challenges and difficulties facing those of you who are shielding with underlying health conditions confined to home, and asking you to shield from others was a huge ask, but it was also a necessary one in the face of this novel virus. The advice to shield will not remain in place for any longer than it needs to, and that is why it is right to update you on how the shielding programme will progress over the coming weeks and months. It is important to stress that the virus still presents a high risk to anyone in an extremely vulnerable group, and the advice remains that staying at home is the best way to prevent infection. However, with the level of infection in the community falling, the risk of exposure is significantly less than it has been over this last 2 months. Therefore, in consultation with the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor, we can advise that from next Monday, the 8th of June, those who are shielding will be able to spend time outside with people from their own household or one person from another household, whilst ensuring social distancing is observed. We believe that this is a reasonable and proportionate first step, and people who are shielding will receive a letter with further advice in the coming days. Furthermore, throughout June, we will continue to monitor the progress of the virus. And if the rate of transmission continues on a downward trend, and of course we all hope that it does, then in consultation with our scientific and medical advisors, we will consider further relaxations for those who are shielding. Before the current shielding period ends, we will provide further clarity about how we will continue to protect those shielding and others indeed who are clinically vulnerable. There's also been some confusion around whether over 70s fall into the same category as those who are shielding. Over 70s are not automatically in the shielded group, but they are more vulnerable. As such, they are advised to be particularly strict when following social distancing guidance. They are at an increased risk of severe disease and would need to continue to be particularly careful if they take advantage of any of the new relaxations. Also today, the Executive approved a proposal from the Economy Minister to allow for the reopening of hotels, guest houses, bed, breakfasts and hostels from the 20th of July if the R number continues to fall. Self-catering properties, caravan sites and holiday and home parks may also reopen from this date. However, this will only happen if the virus remains under control, and of course we will monitor this closely. The rolling back of these and other restrictions will very much depend on how all of us act in the coming weeks and how we limit the spread of COVID-19. That means restricting your activities in public and exercising your rights proportionately and responsibly. You must limit your public activity to only those measures that have been deemed low risk by this Executive, and not anticipate the lifting of restrictions that may come down the lines. And we know there are many, many people who are looking in particular at their own circumstances and asking the question, when can I? Many organisations, as we know, have had to cancel events. Indeed, just today, I marked the 50th anniversary of the creation of the RUC Reserve, and ordinarily that would have been marked by a large church service, but we have had to find another way to mark the RUC GC service and sacrifice. Most of you I know have been following advice from the Executive. However, despite warnings from ministers, from the Chief Medical and Scientific Officers and indeed the Chief Constable, we have seen over the weekend new evidence of complacency, and indeed in the worst cases there have been flagrant disregard for public safety. And scenes like the one that we all witnessed at Ballyholme Beach on Friday night are simply not acceptable. To compound that further, assaulting a police officer is an insult to the police, emergency services and health staff who have been putting their own lives at risk in order to prevent wide-scale death. The world has not beaten COVID-19. This is a global pandemic without a vaccine yet, and it still dwells among us, and it loves mass gatherings. All of us want Northern Ireland to return as quickly as possible to something like the society we took for granted just 3 months ago. But unfortunately, you will prolong that journey if you ignore the public health advice and create the conditions where coronavirus can thrive. The focus of this executive throughout this pandemic has always been on saving lives and protecting our population, all of our population, and we make no apologies for that. The messages we have repeated endlessly from the start of this emergency are as crucial today as they were at the peak. Observe social distancing in public, keep washing your hands regularly and thoroughly, keep your distance, and that is how we will defeat this virus.